Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 6 of the Junior Unplugged podcast. And as has become customary on the podcast, we are joined by yet another guest coming from the East Coast of the United States and self-proclaiming himself as the internet's most delusional Barca fan. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to present to you my conversation with the one, the only, the great Robby Lou. Sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, or tea, we don't discriminate here. We do not discriminate. Enjoy the episode. I'm just really interested in, especially getting your take as a Barca fan, just talking about, I guess, the season as a whole too, but more specifically, like going on to the recent, the Dortmund tie, the recent, really recent, Celta Vigo thriller, the upcoming semi-final against Inter, and as well, like even your Liga games. I mean, we're recording this, we're like, a couple of days away from the Copa del Rey final. Yeah. And as well as like, I think in 3 weeks time as well, there's the El Clasico as well in the league as well. So you can have the league wrapped up, the Copa del Rey wrapped up, potentially in Champions League final, a lot of big things coming for Barcelona. So as a Barca fan, I'd really like to know sort of your take, and as well, in a similar sense, as well as your feelings on Hansi Flick and the season overall and how you guys have had it, thus far. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to talk about Barcelona as always. And, you are a PSG fan, but I feel like you're, I've had some rational conversations with you, and that, helps to get us out of this weird fan mindset that we have online, all the time. See, you're going off on Arsenal fans. I am constantly talking terribly about Madrid and everything. So I understand it. But to get to your point, the schedule is a big problem for us, but I think thankfully it is for the other teams we're facing right now. Madrid has had to deal with a lot recently. They're riddled with injuries, even more so than we have been this season. And so I'm less worried about it. I'm not as worried about it as I would have been if they were a super deep team, or if they, cleared the league like PSG has, or they're out of the league like Arsenal is. So for that, I think Inter Milan has such a big battle. They just lost this weekend to Bologna, I believe. They're I think so. They're going to be even on points with Napoli, something like that.
They're even on points, yeah.
And so they have a ton of football still to worry about. I think they're still in the Copa Italia. So of the 4 teams left, I think Barcelona is facing the team that has the similar amount ahead of them, rather than Arsenal and PSG. That, I guess, is Arsenal in the FA Cup still? I think so.
No, right? Arsenal, this is the Champions League is the only thing that they can compete in.
So again, both those teams, they're realistically just focusing on the Champions League right now. I know that's all Luis Enrique wants. I know that's all he wants. So if I were to face any of these 3 teams based off of how much we have going on, it's Inter. And I think both of the sides of the bracket are set up to be very entertaining, very exciting matches where both teams can win. I think Inter is set up well to exploit Barcelona's flaws, and I think Barcelona can absolutely do the same to Inter. They have been able to counter throughout this season against Benfica, Dortmund, Bayern, and Real Madrid, and so they can do it against Inter too. I'm not saying they're a perfect team, Barcelona, but I don't think Inter is either. And but back to specifically Barcelona, I'm curious what you think of. I don't know, what is your feelings about Barcelona's season and where they're at right now relative to the, I guess, highs they've been at throughout this year?
I mean, I guess for me as a, non-Barca fan and looking, from the outside looking in, I'd say that in a similar vein as PSG, like I would say that you guys are probably ahead of schedule of where I would have thought you guys would be. Like if I were to go and say, as a, looking outside, what would be like a good year for Barca? Maybe, compete well in the league, maybe win, a Copa del Rey or something, and then maybe even like a cheeky, quarterfinal exit. It's not terrible. Then you're looking at where you are now, the football you guys are playing, currently on course still for potentially doing the treble, etc., and just the highs that you guys have hit. I'd say sort of in the similar vein as how PSG was last year. I wasn't expecting us to, reach to a semifinal, do a, domestic treble, etc., so on and so forth. So for me, it's really, I think, you guys are definitely, for me, ahead of schedule and where I'd have you based. And then in terms of the season, again, similar to sort of PSG this season as well, is that there's been, I guess, maybe times where I guess you started off the season really, really, really hot, and then there was a bit of a dip in form, more so just in the in the league. I remember where you guys lost a couple of games in that stretch where you guys were like I think it was right after the El Clasico game, if I'm not mistaken, like when you guys smacked Madrid. After that period, I think you guys struggled a bit. But then recently, brought it back to form. So I think you guys have definitely been more consistent, and especially you think, brand new manager Hansi Flick, given, I think you're well known, financial difficulties at the club, can't really, bring in as many people as you want, the stadium, then, all these different things surrounding the club. It's really impressive to seeing that, despite all that, the product on the pitch, you guys have been delivering without any issues. So I've been extremely, extremely impressed with just how good Barcelona have been. And I'm really shocked as to how good you have been so early in this sort of, rebuild era, if you want to call it, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that's a good point, that we are ahead of schedule. I think where we are at right now, we have created these expectations, or maybe not expectations, but like hopes and dreams of what will happen this season with all this talk of the T word and what else is going on. Yeah. But realistically, I think if I were to, someone were to offer me semifinals of the Champions League, competing till seemingly the last game for La Liga, final of the Copa del Rey, winning the Super Copa, I think I would have taken it no matter what, for anything. So I think setting that expectation for Barca fans, that we've had a great season, a lot of things can happen right now, but where we're at, it's a great stepping stone with so many youngsters, such a good spine of this team being built, that they're great, but that doesn't necessarily mean the rest of this can go perfectly. I'm more, obviously the Champions League I think is going to be more difficult or more unpredictable than La Liga and the Copa del Rey, because Madrid just haven't looked good enough. Yeah. I watched them against Athletic Club on this weekend, and they rotated. They didn't have Danny Vivian. Nico Williams is out injured. Iñaki Williams didn't start. Sunset didn't start. And so their core guys, the guys that have been pushing them through and helping them have a pretty interesting season, were rested against Madrid. And Madrid didn't score until the 93rd minute. Yeah. And so they're not in a good spot. I'm not saying they're incapable of doing it. I think they got a little unlucky against Athletic Club as well, where Vini scored a pretty nice goal that was chalked off for an Endrick offside that I could see them complaining about, and probably fairly so. I think they deserve to win that game nonetheless. But I would be incredibly impressed if they won the Copa del Rey, especially against Barcelona. They're going to have to play Getafe midweek, which is just terror ball. They're gonna, if they walk out of that without injuries, no matter how many points they have, it's a positive. So they've got a lot going on in a way that I'm pretty confident Barcelona are going to scrape away the Copa del Rey.
Really?
I think they want it. Yeah. And I think they are going to be weighing the Copa del Rey, because it's directly against Madrid, more than La Liga for now. Really? Because it's more current. It's easier to look at that game hungrier than it is to look at a game against Mallorca on tomorrow. So it's and the way they've been acting in big games, and Lamine has been stepping up, going hungry like he did in the Euros and everything. I think it feeds into this energy that they have, where Madrid this season in big games, I know for sure they don't want Barcelona winning a treble, and I know that's what they're talking about.
100%, yeah.
But every time they've talked about something this season, it hasn't gone well. You know what I mean? Like all the remontada talk against, cheesy as hell. I get it. It didn't work. And I would be wildly impressed in the Copa del Rey. So I think first and foremost, that I'm pretty comfortable with, even with the state of Barcelona being a little all over the place. That high line is still high lining, but the offsides are coming in a little bit less, and these guys are tired. Cubarsí and Inigo Martinez aren't the fastest. Balde being out is a problem, and if it were against a team that isn't Real Madrid, I would probably be more worried, but because these guys aren't in the best form.
So would you say that do you think you have a better chance of winning the Copa del Rey or the league? Or because
a better chance, I think it's probably pretty, I don't think Madrid are going to be consistent. I don't think they have the mentality right now. And honestly, that the consistency thing and them only having to perform for 90 minutes is different than having to perform for the next 7 games or 6 games. And so I think realistically, like if I'm giving you a percentage, the percentage would be higher for it only being 90 minutes, anything could happen, even if Madrid are playing terrible. We've seen them win playing the worst football I've seen in the past couple of years. You know, the way they won the Champions League last season blows my mind.
Yeah.
But
I mean, even the way they've been playing the last like couple of years is a lot of like what we like to call it inshallah ball. If God wills it, we go through.
Yeah.
So I mean, and it's really been interesting to see even how Madrid fans, and in some way actually shocking to me, even though I mean I think both of us, we agree we have a deep Real Madrid agenda, but even now, like how quickly they've turned on Carlo, like for all like the Madrid, even after, you know, I gotta respect Carlo. He's one of their most successful, you know, managers. He's won them like 2 Champions League last 3 years, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, no, we're happy with the rumors that he's going to be leaving the club, etc., so on and so forth. It's been, I think, yeah, perhaps the tactics is they realize that, yeah, sure they were winning, etc., so on and so forth, but it wasn't really this pretty football, or it was sort of just we do what we need to do and that's it.
And I did see some Carlo out stuff last season, but really what matters for Madrid, it's trophies and winning, and that's it. You know, they don't have a ton of player loyalty. You saw Sergio Ramos with the hang-up celebration. Asensio did the same thing. They just want to win. That's their whole thing. And so I did see some talk about it last season when they were, you know, not playing the best and everything, struggling a little bit, but they won everything basically. You know, and so that's what matters for them. And last season, Xavi, it was all over the place, the Xavi out stuff. So when a team isn't doing well, that's kind of just what happens. People get thrown under the bus. Especially, I think it's really easy for us to see that as people that take in media that is not the country and from those local supporters. I think the sentiment that we are seeing online in, you know, English spaces or wherever you're following online is going to be different than general sentiment from the local area, where I do feel like since we're not there, we might have a little bit less loyalty, and especially the things that we are going to, I don't know about that, but I know the fact that the stuff we are going to see online is the stuff that is going to go viral. If you can look at my channel and go to popular videos, and the most popular videos have a very negative spin on them for the most part. Yeah. Negativity sells, negativity goes viral. And so the stuff that we're going to see on Twitter and you know, all of our headlines or whatever are going to be the negative stuff. So just because we're seeing it doesn't mean that it's necessarily how they all feel. But I think Madrid have played too mid football for too long to be even happy in the slightest with losing while they're losing. So I'm not surprised that there's no way. I saw a quote from ESPN's Julien Laurent, you know who that is. And he was just saying Carlo has no chance of staying for next season. And I think he's absolutely correct. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And they have to find, I don't know if it's Xabi Alonso, I don't know if it's Jurgen Klopp, probably not Klopp with the guys that they have in the squad, but I think that the general uncertainty in the Barcelona squad is outweighed by the significant uncertainty in Real Madrid in a way that I would be impressed if they sneak away with anything this season. You know, and that's at most a draw from Barcelona in the second Clásico, I think May 11th. In the Copa del Rey, I think it's probably still their best chance, but I just think the entire sentiment in Madrid is just very negative right now. These guys, you saw Bellingham just fuming against Arsenal. My guy was angry and
crashing out, yeah.
You know, and I think Bellingham has probably been the most consistent of the big three there. And Rodrigo, you know, sometimes he's able to save them, but he hasn't really been anything. I think he has 1 goal in the past 10 games, and they were saying Inigo Martinez has 2 in the past 10 games. They were just, you know, mocking each other. But I think Barcelona are in a good position right now to have a great season, no matter really what happens in the Champions League, because of partially how bad Madrid are. And, you know, again, 90 minutes, anything can happen. But Inter Milan's a different story. Inter Milan's a little bit different. I don't know if you've watched more of Inter than I have. I don't know if you have some insight there. But.
Yeah, I'm not really in the... Listen, I'll catch, you know, a couple, you know, City A games here and there, but I don't watch it, follow it basically much. And also I'm pretty basically going in the dark and whatever they do in Champions League every once in a while, I'll catch the highlights of the game and whatnot. Sure. But yeah, I'm not really glued into Italian football like that. But I guess speaking on, you mentioned previously the uncertainty within sort of somewhat the Barca camp and comparing it to Madrid. I'm assuming that a lot of that is coming from the latest, you know, Dortmund tie. And then I guess if you want to a certain degree, perhaps the Celta Vigo tie, even though you guys did manage to go through it. Like, what would you say was the cause for everything? Because obviously in the first leg, which we were obviously at, a thumping, dominant, 4-0 display, everything was rosy. You're thinking, potentially, I know 7-0 on aggregate, this, that, and the other. And then, second leg, wait a minute, things go change, 3-1 down. You think, especially in that first half where, I think their XG Dortmund was something like nearly 3 or something, and you think if they are a bit more clinical and some offsides go their way and whatnot, potentially it's a 4-3 game, etc., so on and so forth. So I guess would you just chalk it up to as it's just one of those games that sometimes in the course of the season you're just not on it, or do you think it's showing deeper, more underlying issues with the way Barca play?
Those two games specifically, I think, are easier to understand in that Barcelona were rotating, or they had guys out for injury.
Ballon.
Pedri didn't start in the second leg against Dortmund, and the way Hansi Flick sets up a team, or has set this team up, is they don't really change significantly how they approach a game based on their opponent. They are given circumstances throughout training that they, figure out how to respond to, but they just go into the match, and then whatever shows up, Hansi Flick has already prepared them with, some ways to play that can adjust to however they're being approached. And when you take out a player that has played all season and has been so important, like Pedri, like Lamine, Kubarsi at times as well, it can be very difficult to respond in the same way. And Pedri is so important at breaking through the pressure and just maintaining some understanding of what the game presence is, that when you take him out of it, Barcelona's ability to break through a press is not non-existent, but it's significantly different. Even though Gavi played okay in that match, he's just not on the ball like Pedri is, because nobody is. Nobody can do that. Maybe you could argue Vitinha, and I'd entertain that conversation at times. But he is so important. And you could say the exact same for Lamine in the Celta Vigo match, where he was rested, and I think some other players were rested as well. But we had Lamine rested, and then Balde out on injury, and Balde is a huge loss in possession as well, and defensively with his pace and everything as well. You could argue that, but strictly breaking out of that press is something that Dortmund was so good at. And something that you really need a healthy Pedri and someone who can run through their man, beat their man, basically, to get out of that first line of pressure and then open up chances and whatever, and passing options and stuff like that. And that's what Balde can do. Even if he's not going to put in the best cross all the time or do it much more than get a corner when he's taking somebody on around the box, in pressure, he can get around his man like very few other people, especially Gerard Martin, who is the left back replacement for him, and can open up options and help Barcelona expand out from being really constrained. And so there's a good chance that they're going to lose Balde or he's still going to be out for the Copa del Rey match against Madrid. Madrid also do not have a suffocating press. It's just, you've seen it be okay at times, but unless Vini is running on fumes, and sometimes he's going after it and he can press. You saw him win the ball back on Saliba, but Saliba fell asleep a little bit. They can do it, but I don't think as a unit they have the ability to do it, especially against the way Dortmund did, where they were playing. They had nothing to lose. They were down 4-0. They could go after it. Madrid have a lot to lose in their pride. If they lose 3-0,
they get smacked again.
You know what I mean?
What is it? Yeah. You think I think the first game was 4-0, second game 5-2.
Yeah.
You're already talking about like conceding, plus, 10 goals in 3 games is deep.
Yeah. Exactly. But Barcelona, the way they are right now, like you were saying, Balde is so important, and so is Pedri and Lamine. So any significant changes, anybody goes down really, besides Lewandowski, he is going to be out for 3 weeks, so he's going to miss the Copa del Rey, potentially both legs for Inter. Significant, but not in the same way as those other guys, because they're so crucial to the way Barcelona play, where Lewandowski can be replicated enough, and he's been finishing very well, but I think outside of that, fans are very critical of him, rightly so probably, but it's very uncertain what's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to win, what they're going to come out of this season with, but I know a lot of interesting stuff is still to play. So I'm still looking forward to what's going to happen.
Interesting. And with regards to, I guess, the way that you guys set up against Dortmund and how you guys have been setting up in a Celta Vigo game, I guess a criticism even that I've heard sometimes, or I guess a slight critique more so of Hansi Flick, is that maybe he hasn't really rotated the squad a lot. Would you say that, like, if I had to play like devil's advocate for him, I'd go and say it's just that, of course, as good as, Barca's been really good, but it's also like you sort of really have an 11. And maybe, up front with Ferran Torres, when he comes in, it's not, too dissimilar, et cetera, so on and so forth. But bar that, as you saw, you take Balde out the squad, you put Gerard Martin, it's a completely different squad. If Lamine's out there, it's completely different. Would you say that he sort of has something to redeem himself as sort of if you want, like an excuse to say, yeah, but it's like, look at the step and drop off between, Lamine and whoever's like his second runner and, Balde and Martin? Or do you think it's more so that, no, he should have been rotating more over the course of the season so that when you put Gerard Martin in the situation, he's not, a fish out of water and, discovering, what the high level is for the first time this season?
Right. I'm going to push back against the Gerard Martin bit because Hansi's been playing him a little bit. And the big issue with Barcelona's depth is that their depth doesn't recreate well what their first 11 does. In a way that I'm going to compare it to Atletico Madrid this season, where, when they need to bring guys on, when they need to give guys a break, they take Griezmann off in the 65th and they bring on Correa or Sorloth or Riquelme, and these guys that can run, that can be intense, that can be physical, that can help take advantage of the opponents being tired. It fits the way that Simeone wants to play. It's intimidating for the guys you're playing against and everything. And for Barcelona, and it like complements the game state that they're going to be in. But for Barcelona, a lot of their depth is very significantly different from their normal team or their normal 11, and can't well replicate what they want to do, which is going to be probably a lot of what they have been doing. It's not like everywhere, where I think Raphinha can be replicated somewhat by Fermin Lopez, and they can both be runners in behind. Ferran Torres can do it similarly. Pau Victor can do it similarly to the hold-up play of Lewandowski. Not perfectly, but Pedri, Lamine, Balde specifically have zero comp. Like, there's no one in the squad that can really replicate anything, especially with Casado being out. So without him, that now takes Frankie out of the ability to cover Pedri's role, because, Gavi can come in, but Gavi is just not possessionally what we've seen enough this season. And just really, he just hasn't gotten into the flow of it as much as, we would like to see. And fans have been pretty critical of him as well, but everyone is critical of everyone when they're not perfect. But the Barcelona really don't have the ability to rotate nearly as much as it looks like on paper, because the backups are so much different to the way that they play, and the way that they play so well. So Barcelona can go and win a game 5-1, 7-2, or whatever the scoreline, 7-1 for the Valladolid game. Like, they can do great things. And when they are doing that, it's really hard I can imagine it's hard for Hansi to be like, okay, now I'm going to completely change the team and we're going to have to scrape out a win here 1-0 because we don't have the guys to do it. And then it's going to be really hard for the fans to see that. They're going to be critical of him for playing mid-football. And when they're playing so great, most of the time it's kind of, I'm upset with Hansi for not rotating these guys, giving them some more of a break, but also I understand he doesn't really have an option, because Pedri, the entire way the team has been played or has been taught to play is built around Pedri and Lamine Yamal being a wide outlet. Lamine is so critical to the way this team attacks, because without him, they are so one-dimensional. There's such a lack of width, and no one can replicate it. Raphinha is not a touchline winger at all. He just cannot really take on guys that well in wide spaces, doesn't always put the best crosses in, and sometimes he can touch inside and make a good cross on his left from the right side and chip over the back line, we see Lamine do all the time. And Raphinha can make those passes a lot, but he's just not going to beat his man like Dembele used to do, or like Doué has been doing for you guys. It's just not the same thing. And that doesn't mean Raphinha isn't great. That doesn't mean he hasn't had a ridiculous season and scored so many game-saving goals, which is, but he's just not the profile we need there. And that's why a lot of fans were calling for Nico Williams or, Doué. I think they actually made an approach for him over the summer, but he was worried about them getting registered for good reason. He didn't sign, or he didn't entertain the call or something. But Barcelona are in a little uncomfortable spot. I think we've been relatively lucky on injuries, even though we've had a number. Daniel went out every 3 games, and that's why we're like, don't play him at all, Hansi, until the Copa del Rey match. But I think I don't know. Like we've lost Casado over this season. Ter Stegen went out, and fans will argue if that's a bad thing or a good thing. I don't want to have that conversation right now. But Landon Bernal went out for the season with an ACL, and all of that. But I don't know. I think it's a fair conversation to have. You know what I mean? They don't have the depth that PSG have. They don't have the quality all around that I think would be nice, but with the financial limitations that they do have, and Laporta constantly wanting to spend big on big name players that will sell jerseys and bring fans to the stadium. It's gonna be tough for them to sign a 25 million euro left back, or Ratiu at right back, which people have been calling for some depth for Koundé and things like that. But it's far from perfect, that's for sure. And Inter Milan is absolutely intimidating to look at, especially with, like you said, all the games around that and everything they're going to have to worry about. I think it's Madrid, Inter Milan, Valladolid, Inter Milan, Madrid, or something like that. Something like that. It's going to be a wild couple of weeks for Barcelona. But I don't know. I really don't know what to predict. I don't really know what will come out of it. I think any trophy that they win, whatever it is a W. I think for morale and for storylines and everything, the UCL is just different than both the Copa del Rey and La Liga. But whatever happens, I think I'm happy.
Interesting. And I'd really like to, this is like probably one of the things I really want to talk to you most about, and get your Barca's fans, your opinion on it. And it's to do with what I would say is, in one way, your biggest weakness, but also one of your biggest strengths. And it's that infamous Hansi Flick high line. Like, obviously, at the beginning of the season, I was like most people, I was extremely skeptical of it. Sure. I was like, okay, once you guys face a real team, you guys are going to be, leaking in goals, as bad as, like a bad flood, so on and so forth. But in fairness, you go and you look at like the stats and whatnot, you guys have had like the most offsides of any of the, European teams, and not by, Fugazi, a couple, 3, like by like double and whatnot, stuff like that. Yeah. And it's held tight. Obviously, not the, greatest defense for Barca, but I mean, it's doing the job, etc., so on and so forth. But like, I from my perspective, I do respect the principle of we play our high line regardless of what it is. Like, I was watching the Dortmund highlights again, the second game, and just seeing like how your defenders, like, they're like really playing the line, so on and so forth, checking it, so on and so forth. I'm just like, if my PSG conceded a goal like that, where like we play the defender offside and they score and we're knocked out, I'd lose my mind over something like that. But I guess I'd really like to know, like, how do you feel about the high line? Do you think it's more like a blessing and a curse? Do you think it's just sort of, that's how we play? Whatever happens. If we get knocked out by it, so be it. Or do you also be like, at times, I'd rather play, but more pragmatic football, etc., so on and so forth. I'd really like to know what your opinion on this infamous Hansi Flick high line is. Yeah,
it's just the high risk, high reward story thing. It is. I don't know. The punditry on it is so surface level, dude. I can't turn on ESPN FC anymore because it's just Craig Burley saying this high line's going to get found out when they play Madrid. It's over. You know what I mean? And I think it's very easy to be like, what the hell are they doing? But we have seen, I don't remember exactly what game it is, but Barcelona got a red card, and instead of, playing with 10 men with a high line like we saw them do against Monaco earlier in the season, Hansi Flick adjusted. They played deeper. Araujo came in, and, they figured it out with a deeper, more normal, you could argue, line, which shows to me that they can be pragmatic. They can adjust to the game state, and they can change the way they play. They're not necessarily going to go crazy high line the entire game, depending on what's going on. And it is worrying, but I think it is just something we've accepted, that these guys are going to hold this high line like crazy, and they're going to concede a couple times maybe, but they're also going to be, with that high line, able to press higher, able to win the ball back in dangerous positions, and able to, score. And these guys have proven game in and game out, more or less, that they can. I would be interested to see how Lewandowski being out potentially affects that, because Ferran Torres, I guess you could argue Pau Victor, who's just another backup striker, how they would convert without him. We also have seen Dani Olmo play as a false 9, and the way he links up is ridiculous sometimes. He looks so good. He's also not as reliable. But yeah, it's just something I'd accept. You know, if they lose to a goal in the 93rd because of that high line, I think it just is what it is. As long as it's not Araujo, if it's the Uruguayan, the fans are going to lose their minds. I don't know. They've been very critical of him since the Barca tackle. You know what I mean? And then the rest of that last season, he wasn't playing phenomenally. So I think if he's the if that happens to him, I don't know. Some bad words are going to be said for sure. But I think it's just high risk, high reward. We've seen some really sick football played because of it that I think we are willing to be okay with the fact that they're going to concede sometimes because they're also really good at playing them offside all the time.
True. I mean, yeah, it's hard to I think perhaps at the beginning of the season it's a fair criticism to go and make of playing against, some, good La Liga teams, but, teams that, can't exploit like on the back. But then in fairness, you have to go and say they've played Madrid twice with, Vini, Mbappe, people who you say are probably the best apt to go and exploit a high line and left them to 2 goals. And if you really want to go and be like, really analyze them, one of the goals was that Mbappe, it was more of a counterattack rather than, exploiting like the high line. That first leg he was offside, how many ever times it was. So it worked then. And then the second goal was just if you want a pretty good strike from Rodrigo. So it's not like that high line has been faltered against them. I guess maybe more so, like I think in that Dortmund game, that's maybe where it's a lot, closer and a lot tighter. I'm just thinking, I'm not sure, Inter Milan are, I don't know, known for being the most pacey team, so on and so forth. But you think you got, Lautaro running in behind, Marcus Thuram as well. Do you think that they could pose perhaps the biggest threat to that high line that you guys have seen this season, or are you still, pretty confident that's going to be like, any other big team and so on and so forth?
Well, their strikers aren't the fastest, so I'm less worried about them than I would have been about Mbappe or about Vini. Than I was about having Adeyemi running around you, 𝐓𝐑𝐄 on the right side for them, for Dortmund, the potential of Saka or Dembele or Doué. I don't want those guys anywhere near this back line. But I think that area specifically, no, but then the fullback, you could argue DeMarco or, whoever's running up alongside them. Because a lot of the times Lautaro and Thuram are just, they're bouncing the ball off them, trying to find an outlet from them. They're not necessarily going to be the guys running in behind. So yes, they are definitely able to do that with the, side that they have. And then, the guys like Barella and Calhanoglu in the midfield that can easily pick them out. Those great runs in, but I'm not nearly as intimidated by it, the high line being as much of an issue than I would have been earlier this season with Madrid. Or even Bayern, with those guys. So yeah, it is, it can always be called out, but I don't know. I think a lot about this Champions League too is just, I really couldn't imagine much better fit semifinals in the way I think Arsenal can. I think there were a few teams that would have been pretty solid, confident, could have beat PSG the way they've been playing. Aston Villa second leg changed that a little bit, brought some doubt, similar to Dortmund second leg for Barcelona. But I think Arsenal are, they can sit back, they can play as healthy shape, they can play 13 midfielders and, maintain possession or whatever they're going to do. And I think that's set up to handle. They have Saliba, who's been ridiculous, and Kivior looked solid as well. And Raya can stand on his forehead and do his thing, I guess. But I think they are set up to, you can't really pick a obvious winner. I can see Arsenal going through. I can see PSG going through. For Barcelona, I can see Barca going through. I can see Inter Milan scraping through it as well. Whatever happens, for the love of God, cannot be Arsenal versus Inter Milan.
There's some terrorism football, park the bus, the plane, the train, all the cars and everything. Yeah, no, that would be,
oh my God.
It would be, I think as most people would go and say, and I'd be really curious to get your perspective on it. Obviously especially after those first legs of the quarterfinals, and even before the quarterfinals even began, I think everybody had PSG and Barca as, favorites to go on and face each other in the final. I think it's probably right now, probably the final that everybody wants, even before then, or perhaps the classical final, before, Real Madrid, did, stank it up, so on and so forth. But, it's interesting to see that after both their quarterfinal legs, if I'm not mistaken, PSG and both Barca went from being favorites to, not only be in the final, but win it all, but Barca and PSG both are now least likely to go and make it through, and both Inter and Arsenal are now more likely to go on and win it and make it to the final. In some respects, I guess I can understand why that comes from, PSG's, second leg, scare against Southampton. Same with Barca, letting in 3 goals against, a good Dortmund side, yes, but a Dortmund side is also, struggling, in the league, especially how dominant they were in that first leg. Perhaps, a few questions were raised as to, okay, how can they do this even against the best teams, in an Inter, a team that can exploit them more and will be a lot more, resilient defensively. So I think there is some fairness in that. And then also, like, from the Arsenal and Inter perspective, I mean, Inter, you knock out Bayern Munich, who would have had the final in their own stadium, a big team, good, but not the greatest Bayern Munich ever, but, still a big European side. And then Arsenal, even though, it's a sickly Real Madrid, it's, probably one of the worst Real Madrids in the last, 7-8 years, and probably since 2019 when they lost to Ajax. It's still Real Madrid, it's still Vini, it's still Mbappe, all this stuff. And I think you get a natural boost in beating the holders and beating the mighty Real Madrid. And also for me, I also think there's perhaps, a bit of, English, bias in that, footballing bias going into that. But I do you think that, like, from the Barca perspective and the Inter one, do you think that, because honestly for me, I think really all the ties, as you previously said, are like really 50-50. I think at best you can go and say, 55-45, but I could see either team making it to the final. Even for me, even though I have really did not like Arsenal, I could see Arsenal going and beating PSG. I could see Barcelona beating Inter in the same way I could see Inter beating Barca. I think it's probably one of the, for me at least, the most even semifinals in the Champions League I've seen in a really, really long time. But going to that Inter Barca game, I still feel like I would give the edge ever so slightly to Barca, just because of the peak that I saw from Barca and being able to smacking Madrid, smacking Bayern, etc., so on and so forth. I just think you guys can do it. And also, is given even that Inter Bayern game, as good as Inter were and as well as defended, in that first leg, they gave Bayern a lot of chances. And realistically speaking, I think if Bayern are a bit more clinical, I think they probably win that game and could potentially have won the tie. And I just think that Barca, with their superior attacking threat, could cause them more problems. Now, obviously, with Lewandowski out, and I'd be curious to see your take on, do you think if Fermin, Ferran or Dani Olmo, whoever they decide to put in as Lewa's replacement, do you think they could replicate and be just as dangerous? Or do you think there's a pretty significant drop-off between a Lewa, Raphinha, Lamine attack and Lamine, Raphinha, and Dani Olmo or Ferran Torres attack? I'd be curious to see your opinion on it.
To first answer your first point about the I don't know, I see so many probabilities. I don't know if it's from Score 90 or something, but just
Score
doing
90,
the
Opta
percentage
Sport,
chances.
all that. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just nonsense to me. I really don't think you can pick an obvious in any of them. I would probably still edge Barca because my main takeaway from the last 2 games is that I want to see a team really make Barca struggle right now without them rotating. We saw, I guess you could argue Betis. They drew 1-1 and I was at that game as well. And they looked fine, but also, yeah, it was meh, and that was the full health squad, but it was also playing Betis in the league, and Betis has also had a very, very successful season this year for their standards. And so I want to see this kind of performance, like against Dortmund or Celta, with a full strength team in, with Balde in, with Pedri in, with Lamine starting, with all of that happening. I would be surprised if any team can do that, even if it's PSG, which I think is the most dangerous team besides Barcelona in the Champions League right now. But I don't know. I think to even go so far as to give them numbers, it's just silly to me. I don't know, whatever. They're going to do what they're going to do for clicks. That's going to get shared around and be triggerable, and that, increases their impressions and everything. So I understand it, but I think Arsenal versus PSG, I'm still a little skeptical of how well Arsenal can score. I think they only scored 1 run of play goal against Madrid in the first leg. Right? The Marino goal?
Marino goal, yeah, from the Miles Lewis-Skelly pass, yeah.
I think they created chances, but they had to score 2 free kicks, which is not necessarily the most reliable thing to score. They have scored a lot of set pieces, but I think there's always a little bit of luck. The walls were set up weirdly, and so I think now seeing that, PSG is probably going to set up a slightly better wall, I'd assume. Enrique is probably screaming at somebody in Spanish right now to figure it out. And so I don't know. I just still playing Marino at striker. I'm a little doubtful of how well they are going to put it in the back of the net, especially against a team that can be so intimidating like PSG in a way Madrid just wasn't. They were just not good at all. at all. And they should have been, but they're not working great together. Ancelotti's whole system is based on individuality and someone being special, doing something special. And you could just tell, by the way, the point I made about Bellingham being so upset before in that Arsenal match, and then again, actually, on the weekend against Athletic Club, where I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a team that's clicking well, that has a healthy environment around them, and that are feeling well with each other. And so I think it was easier for Arsenal to put their heads together, to fight back and to do their thing, than it would be against PSG, who are going to be wildly hungry in this line. So I would probably give them the edge as well. But like slightly, I think it is very close. I think I could see Arsenal playing a little terror ball and playing 14 midfielders and, doing their thing. And that's fine. It is that's how the game works sometimes. But then it could also go the way of the Madrid Atleti game, where they went to pens and then Julian Alvarez touched the ball twice apparently. And it is what it is. So I do think it's fun. I think it's exciting for us. I think it's easy for us to say it's exciting. I don't necessarily know if neutrals think it's as exciting. And I definitely don't think they will if Inter and Arsenal make it. I mean, they'll probably, I guess the English fans will want Arsenal to win unless they're, I don't know, from Manchester or something. Sure, yeah. But I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens. I think that's just the main sentiment here.
I see. And in terms of with Lewa's injury, how significant do you think that is to you guys?
Right. I don't know. He isn't the greatest finisher, which is something that people don't like when I point out. But if you look at his XGs to the goals he's scored, it's not great, or it's not prolific in the way you would expect the best striker in the world, or one of the best strikers in the world, to be. It really hasn't been that case, bar probably Harry Kane, for the past 4 years. Like, Erling Haaland is not the most efficient finisher. He missed a lot of chances. Mbappe was terrible this season, missed a ton of chances. Like, we just don't have the most quality finishers, and Lewandowski isn't really one of them. Now, I think I saw again when Ferran Torres came in, when I was at the match. I don't know if it was at the Dortmund or the Betis game, but he just makes some weird passes sometimes. He makes some weird choices. He's able to fill space better. He's able to press harder and link up better. But he makes some choices that are like a player that doesn't play very often or doesn't connect with his teammates. They're not necessarily going to know where he's going to place the ball because they're not used to playing with him, and he's not sure where to put it either. So I would be interested to see how well he's going to do, because I think he would be the first choice. We've seen Dani Olmo play a little bit of a false nine, which has been successful. I think Dani Olmo looks ridiculous, but again, you can't play him every game. We're not going to see him play against Mallorca tomorrow. I think they're probably going to, or I don't know when you're posting this today, it could be, or 2 days ago. I think it would be Ferran Torres, so I think we'll get a better idea of how Ferran's working. I think they create enough chances for other players that they can be okay, especially against Madrid. I think Inter Milan's a little bit different. They're going to be physical. They have massive center backs. And just, they're going to be slightly more physical than Madrid, bar Rudiger, will be. And I think it'll be a different battle against Inter, where it's less predictable, and probably it would be better to have Lewandowski. Obviously, I would rather not have one of the starters injured, but I think we will fare better against Madrid without Lewandowski than we will against Inter. But again, I want to see how Ferran Torres does first there, because he's not a great finisher, but again, he can operate in spaces a little bit better, and you see a little bit more close play, especially near the box, better without Lewandowski in, and that probably would have been helpful against Celta Vigo, because since we didn't have Lamine or Balde and we had no width, and our width was from not the best players. So you don't want Gerard Martin being your only wide player, and so that allowed Celta to be very narrow. And Lewandowski's just not the best in picking out passes when it's super narrow. We saw a couple cool flick-ons, but didn't really come together like crazy. In a way, I would expect Ferran Torres, and especially if Dani Olmo is operating with him or around him, I think it would be a very healthy combination. Fermin Lopez is good in making runs in behind too as well. So I think we have enough profile there to be dangerous still, to not really be wildly effective. I think if they're put to a point where they struggle, Lewandowski can be someone who saves them. We've seen that a couple times this season where, they're down and he scores a absolute worldie. Doesn't do it a ton, but he's done it enough that he's able to bounce back this momentum where he has that mentality of a winner, of someone who's won everything in a way, bar the Ballon d'Or, I guess you could say, but in a way that the rest of this team doesn't have. And without him, I would be interested to see if they can come back in the same way and fight back. I don't know. I just don't know if they have that same like lethal, crazy mentality that Lewandowski has sometimes. He like, you know, when Barcelona's down and out in the past couple of years, they've been down and out. They don't come back. And so say they go down 2-0 against Inter in the first leg. I don't know if they can go to the San Siro in the second and do the same thing. You know what I mean? Especially without Lewandowski, but it'd be interesting to see nonetheless. Yeah.
Interesting. So you don't think that even like, well, because I mean, I wasn't watching the Celta Vigo game like actively, but like, I'm just thinking, do you not think that, especially because there's been a couple of times this season where you guys have been, you know, down in the league game, and obviously, you know, a Liga game is not the same thing as, you know, a Champions League semi-final, but do you not think that something like this last weekend where you guys were down, you know, 3-1, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 you guys go and win the game 4-3. Do you not think that, you know, games like that, moments like that can give a belief in the team that, hey, you know what, even if we're down by 2, we're FC Barcelona, we've got Lamine Yamal, we've got Raphinha, we've got whoever it is that can go and score the goal, do a moment of magic, and we're back in this game just like that? Do you just not think that they can replicate that in the Champions League, or it's more so like a Liga thing?
I think the Dortmund second leg is a sign that there's still a little bit of that, you know, shock, that, I don't know what the word is, the baggage from our failures in the league in the past, for especially like Pedri, big Barca guys. Pedri, Frankie's been there for years, Gavi, and maybe Kubarsi, and these guys that are the core of the team that play so well and so are so important. But there's something there that Lewandowski doesn't really have. I don't know if Lamine has it, but it puts a lot of weight on Raphinha without Lewandowski, where like against Celta Vigo, he scored a sick header that Lamine was able to pick him out for. And then he scored the pen with a great pen. He was able to take the team on his back a little bit after having a month and a half of playing really not good football, not great, talking a lot, getting people talking about him and, you know, creating some drama and stuff. I think it was a little overblown, but the point is he was able to step up for the team when Lewandowski went out and someone needed to. That puts a lot of pressure on Raphinha now. And we've seen some times where he is able to do that a lot, but also I'd rather have multiple guys that can take that on and that they can score themselves. I think Lamine can do that in big games. We saw him do it in the Euros. I know he can do it. He hasn't scored a ton recently. And so I don't know if he would be able to take on that pressure as much. I think they would, but I'm just creating some questions that I have in my mind based on what I've seen from the side so far. And so I think that would be my biggest worry, is not necessarily if Raphinha is not on form, if he's not finishing and Lamine isn't finishing, what then? You know, then I guess you have Dani Olmo to operate. And so that it's nice to have answers there, and more so than Madrid, I think, where if Mbappe isn't scoring worldies, if Vini isn't doing his thing, at this point, no one's picking out the runs from Bellingham and they don't really have any answers to it anymore. They don't really know what to do. And then Rodrigo's on such a dry streak, you know what I mean? But I think Barcelona have enough answers that, yes, I can fight through this. But again, as a Barcelona fan who has watched absolutely terrible things happen to this club in the past 8 years, it's hard to be just positive. You know what I mean? I do see some issues.
There's always a lingering, you know, belief of we've seen in the past. Similar, I guess, to the PSG moment. Yeah. I'm not sure how you probably lived the second leg in the Dortmund game, but I mean, I could say for me, when that third Aston Villa goal went in, I mean, on my stream, I might have looked calm and whatnot, but inside, I was like, if we can see another goal, I might crash out live on stream. I was gonna, but I mean, yeah, both clubs have known some pretty big, massive scares. And obviously, you guys last year, you think of, you know, us, you know, the remontada against you guys, Roma, I mean, both fan bases, I think it's fair to say, have been through some pretty significant moments that are going to be on our hearts for a long time. I don't want to take too much more of your time, and so I guess it's probably going to be my final question. But I'd like to know, from your perspective, obviously, you know, as happens every year, Barcelona, one of the best teams in the world right now, and naturally you get the questions of, you know, Ballon d'Or, who's the best player, this, that, and the other. And so I'd really like to know, from your perspective, who, in your opinion, are your top 3, and like rank them in your order of who are the best players. If you want to do, you can do best players and also like most influential players to Barca. I
think they're different questions. I think the Ballon d'Or is much less most important and much more who's going to get the votes from these journalists from everywhere. And because of that, I don't think Pedri will win. I don't think Lewandowski could win. I don't think, you know, other guys will get shouts. I think it's going to be guys that have this PR push a little bit, or that you're seeing talked about more, because these journalists don't necessarily have the best ball knowledge, as I don't, definitely for sure, but I'm the one talking and making videos on YouTube just because I somehow am. You know what I mean? These journalists are picked to do it. And so it's hard to necessarily say who is the best or who is the most likely to get those votes. I think it probably would be Raphinha if you're asking me that way. But I think if you were asking me my most important players for this season, for how it's happened and how it's been so great, I would probably put Pedri first because he's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He doesn't lose the ball. And then when he does, he wins it back.
Yeah.
He is just so paramount to not only this team going forward, to just working in possession. And he's been putting some pretty good tackles in lately too. Like, he's so well-rounded. No one can do what he does either. For Barcelona, nobody can do it. And that's scary. You see Frankie de Jong stepping into his form a little bit, and that changes a little bit. But Pedri is ridiculous. So he's got to be my number one. And then it gets a little hairy. It doesn't get hairy. It's a good problem to have. I have a bunch of guys overperforming your expectations.
Yeah.
But Lamine Yamal, again, you could argue that he's number two because we can't replicate what he can do without him, right? And that having that someone who could take three guys on at once, bring all of that pressure over to the wing and open up space for Raphinha, for Fermin Lopez, for Dani Olmo and Lewandowski to link up together. Wouldn't be there without Lamine. And so I think putting Lamine second is probably what I would do. And he's just ridiculously good, bro. And the fact that he's 17 blows my mind.
That's crazy.
And I'm so worried. He's played 1 billion minutes. He's already played more minutes this season than he did last season. He's still got 10, 11 games, I think, to play.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's worrying, but I'm going to not think about that. Not think about the ridiculous amount of football he plays. And I think probably putting him second there because, again, you can't replicate what he can do. And just because he hasn't been scoring a ton doesn't mean he doesn't have 20 assists this season.
Yeah, 20. So,
and I think you could also put Raphinha there because Raphinha has been incredibly efficient in the most important times to do so. He's so clutch. He just figures it out. And he did it against Celta. He's done it countless times throughout the season. And I think without him finishing well, if you have Dembele in that position, or I'll say Ferran Torres because I guess Raphinha's a runner. He's just a much different player to what we've seen from Dembele this season even, but especially for Barcelona. That I don't think it's necessarily the best comparison. So if you have Ferran Torres there who doesn't finish super well and isn't nearly as hungry, I don't know. I don't know how this team does this season. And I think I would probably put it Pedri, Lamine, Raphinha, because they're the most obvious game changers. You could also say Inigo Martinez because we've seen this backline not backline nearly as well without him. He's such a leader in the dressing room, but I think he gives these guys such a solid understanding of where to be, where to step up. I think it was, he wasn't played against Dortmund as well. He was rotated out because he was on yellow card accumulation. If he were to get another one, he'd miss the semifinal, the semifinal first leg. And you saw Koundé, the deepest for the first goal or that led to the penalty, and like played somebody on because he was solid meter or two further back than everybody else. With Inigo Martinez, you just don't see that happening nearly as much. I think he leads his back line, tells them where to be, and they do it. And without that back line, they definitely aren't where they are this season. You could say Kubarsi with his ability on the ball and defensive prowess as well. I think this team is so incredibly well-rounded, at least the starting 11. Frankie de Jong has been so incredible too at like figuring out how to play his position again because he was like nervous with his ankle. He didn't want to go in for tackles. The story around Frankie this season is really good. I really want to do a video on him because he was playing terribly as a number 10 because he couldn't put in a tackle. And so Hansi wanted to get him game time and figure it out. And now we've seen him put in tackles now and become 2019 Frankie a little bit again, where he's turning into space, beating his man and maintaining possession and operating as a pivot a little bit. And it's great to see. It's just, I think this team has become so well-rounded. I don't think they're being carried by anybody specifically besides Pedri. He's the GOAT, man. This guy is the GOAT. I don't think he's going to win the Ballon d'Or, though. Back to your main point here. We'll just bring it full circle. I think the guy who has the best chance for winning it for Barcelona is going to be Raphinha, unless the conversation around Lewandowski changes, which I don't think will happen since he's going to be out for 3 weeks in the most important part of the season now. Unless he scores a hattie in the final in the Champions League to beat PSG 4-3, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll probably be Raphinha. If if someone from Barcelona wins and the PR push doesn't shift to Lewandowski, I think it'll be Raphinha. And I was talking to a lot of my chat about this, about why I think Raphinha is making a stronger argument for himself this season than even Vini last season. And I think Vini was really, really good in the Champions League last year. I think there's also that asterisk of the way he behaved, the choke slamming against RB Leipzig. Like he did a lot of things wrong, but he played really good football in the Champions League. But he missed basically half the season, or it felt like half the season. And in that half season, Jude Bellingham was saving them in La Liga, scoring these tap-ins like crazy. But he was winning them games and getting himself all this Ballon d'Or PR. In a way, I think he took votes away from Vini, made the argument less clear. You think they split
votes then last year, is what you're saying? Are you trying to say, like, are you thinking that potentially there could be a similar thing at Barca with, Raphinha, potentially Lewandowski? I mean, I think you're underestimating how, like, the pull Pedri can have, because, I mean, around the world, I feel like maybe because you don't see it as you're Barca, you're mainly within the Barca sphere, but like even like as PSG, I go and say like I think Pedri walks into every single midfield ever. I think he's even above Vitinha, even above PSG. I think he's been the best midfielder in the world, hands down. And especially seeing that, if Rodri can go and win it, and we said like last year, football's one, that he's been the best, etc., so on and so forth. Obviously, there's been, controversy. I think Pedri is making a better, more, impactful push than I think Rodri did last season. Because you think, well, obviously we'll have to wait and see how, things pan out. If, Barca gets eliminated in the semis, the discussion changes. But like you go and you think, you guys, potential treble winners right here. He's been consistent, doing it in the league, etc., so on and so forth. He's been the maestro in that midfield, press resistant, all these other things. I think he can make a legitimate shout. I think the only thing perhaps that would falter him is, as you mentioned, is that potential vote splitting with, Raphinha, who's been excellent, Lamine as well.
Sure.
But like, yeah, I think probably agree with you in terms of like, even though Raphinha is the one, getting all the limelights for the goals, etc., and Lamine with the assists and so on and so forth, and the 17 and all this. For me, from looking in, if there's one player I'd want to take from you guys, it definitely be Pedri. Definitely be Pedri. Yeah.
Well, you have 13 mid wingers, so you don't really need Lamine.
Yeah, we don't.
But I think the problem with Pedri is not problem for his Ballon d'Or push is that he just doesn't have the numbers. He's got 12 goal contributions in quick math, 47 games or 47 games played, and so it's not like Rodri, where Rodri, I think he had like 25 goal contributions or something last season. And I think that's going to hold Pedri back. And that's also a point in why I think Raphinha's argument is so much better than Vini's last year, because Raphinha is putting up ridiculous numbers. And he's not playing perfect football. He's not Messi. He's not Cristiano Ronaldo beating everybody, creating, hitting a knuckleball from a billion yards out. He's not doing all these things that are so, I don't know, so normal for us that we're used to seeing, talked about for Ballon d'Or pushes. It's just an accumulation of great stats, enough viral moments. Like I was listening to the Ranks FC podcast, and after Barcelona beat Benfica, and the goal he scored to end that game, and the referee, like, that might have been a foul in the box, it might have been a penalty for Benfica. I totally recognize that. I don't care. The goal was ridiculous. And in the Ranks FC podcast, they said, one of the guys said that his son was recreating that goal with his dad after that game. And this is a British Fulham fan living in San Diego, celebrating a goal by a Brazilian from a Spanish team. And it's that ability to, I don't know, to just aura farm.
You know
what I mean? That I don't think Vini really had. And adding that to the stats, to the way Barcelona is playing, I think is going to, I think really Raphinha can really win. I think Barcelona probably have to win more than La Liga to win it, because Salah has really good numbers as well. And that number debate isn't really going to be enough, I think, to make it a clear-cut win for him, unless Barcelona wins at least one of these three titles, potentially more on top of La Liga as well.
Oh, so you still think that Salah is still in the conversation?
I think it has to be. I think Dembele is there, but I don't think the PR push is there. I don't think Dembele has the PR power. I just don't think he does. And it is France football giving it out, so I don't know. True. Maybe he does. But what do you think? I think it has to be Dembele, Salah, and Raphinha. I don't know.
The thing for me with Salah, and I mean, I'm here in England, a lot of people have, like, even here, they've like put him. There's like they said like there's no way he's going to win it. And the biggest thing with him is the fact that he ghosted in the biggest games. Like, I mean, you know, you obviously hear, you know, the Premier League, and I have my issues, you know, with the, you know, I've got a low-key a Prem agenda and so on and so forth. The way people be glazing.
Sign me up. I'm in.
The way that people be glazing the Premier League here, so on and so forth. But like, people are talking about, it's nice that, you know, he does against Southampton, you know, Fulham and whatnot, stat padding against, you know, good Prem teams and whatnot. But you think of like the big games. Obviously, Madrid. Well, the Madrid game, he missed a penalty.
Sure.
You think the PSG game got clamped twice by Nuno Mendes. It was non-existent. I think there's a massive disservice to him. And on top of that, also the fact that they also then lost in the Carabao Cup final as well. So, I mean, as good of a season he's going to have in the Premier League, first and foremost, we've seen better seasons from like Haaland, and he didn't win it. But then he's really fallen off in terms of like he's not really been all that in the big games, the games that really matter. Whereas you compare that to Raphinha, where you're losing 3-1, gets you 2 goals, bang, you win the game against Benfica, done it against Real Madrid and in the Super Copa final, etc., so on and so forth. I think for me, that clears. And even Dembele, you go and think, well, again, that game against City, that he's the one who gets the first goal. Against Liverpool is the one who scores, his penalty as well, all this stuff, I think puts them perhaps potentially above. And for me, like, I wouldn't even be surprised if he doesn't even make the top 5, honestly, in the Ballon d'Or voting.
No, I think you just made a very good argument against it. I think I wanted to be reasonable because I know there's going to be English fans watching this and wanting to scream Salah. I guess Liverpool fans only, maybe. But okay, so how you're a PSG fan? Compare Dembele and whoever you think from Barcelona is most likely to get that push. I'm saying it's probably Raphinha, but do you think it could be Pedri? Like, I want to hear the Dembele PR push for Ballon d'Or.
Okay. So the thing with Dembele is a lot like last season. A lot of it was that, like, I guess maybe similar to how he was with at Barcelona. Maybe you're a Barca fan. Is that he didn't give you the most, you know, GA, or realistically, he didn't score you the most goals. He got a lot of assists off a lot of times.
Right.
But the end product in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net was never there. But in terms of like what he did, he's probably one of the best players up there with, you know, Lamine Yamal, so on and so forth, in like one-on-one and like causing just mayhem to your defense. Just ridiculous, and like will beat his man like, you know, 6 out of 5 times. That's how good he is, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
But this time around, actually, ever since that 2025, he's been put into that, you know, false 9 role, etc., and he's getting more goals, but actually isn't doing nearly as much, you know, in terms of, you know, beating his man. And whereas before he could have like a really, really good performance but not score. This year, a lot of times we've had like games where he'd score like a brace and whatnot, but I feel like hasn't had the best game necessarily, but he's getting the GA.
Okay, so it's kind of like Bellingham last season, where he scored a couple bangers, but I'm not watching PSG game in and game out, if at all, honestly. I don't know if I've watched any league games from them this season. Is he scoring worldies? Is he being impressive? Is he making those, I guess, those PR-able moments? Like, is he getting San Diegoans from, you know, in California to recreate a goal of his? You know, does he have that at moments this season?
I mean, he's had like, you know, a couple good I wouldn't go and say like, even still probably one of his best goals, probably that goal that he scored in the first second against Barca. Like, he's scoring like just good striker goals. A lot of them, if not, like, he's been getting a lot of tap-ins. He's been in the right place at the right time, finishing the ball. Like, his goals has been, you know, crazy. You know, Bellingham, I'm thinking back to that first El Clasico where he smacks one from like 30 yards out. It's not been stuff like that or late minute goals. It's been, you know, normal goals in the league, dribbles past a couple players, slots it in, or gets a pass, so on and so forth. And so to go back onto your question on if I had to compare it to like who I think has the best shout for Barca, it's because I'm sort of like you in that if I had to say in terms of like football, we're talking about, you know, the ball, like the play, I'd probably say Pedri. I'd go compare him to Pedri, but realistically with the Ballon d'Or, you know, how it's very attacker, you know, biased. I think the more fair comparison would be to Raphinha. In that aspect, I probably I put Raphinha ahead of him just because in terms of like the biggest thing, Dembele, as I said previously, hasn't been playing. He's been playing well and whatnot. But if you compare him, the biggest thing that why people are saying, oh, look at Dembele is the GA, the goals and so on and so forth. And this season, his assists have taken a massive dip. I think he's not even.
Yeah, I have the stats. He's got 9 assists.
Yeah, so he's not assisting nearly as much as he was last year. Yeah. And if you want to compare him like to Raphinha, the biggest thing with Raphinha is that he's getting goals and he's getting assists. And in that domain, he's got him beat. So I'd put Raphinha, for me, number 1, I'd put Raphinha, number 2, Dembele, and number 3 for me in my Ballon d'Or currently, I'd probably put Pedri.
Yeah.
I probably with Pedri. That's how I'd see it.
I think there is a chance Pedri can win, but I think he needs a goal like he scored against Atleti, I think 2 years ago, where he he chops once, beats his man, slides past him, chops again, man slides past him, and then he scores inside the box.
I remember that goal, yeah.
If he could do that in the Copa del Rey final, in the Champions League final, or even against Inter Milan, and honestly, I think those moments can change people's voting decisions in that, the silly Ballon d'Or vote. I think that those moments could win it for Pedri. Even though he's been fantastic all season, he's making, football fans from all over the world like absolutely awestruck at the way he's playing. I think it'll take a moment like that for Pedri to win. And yeah, I think you've made a really good point against Dembele not winning it. So I think that makes sense though. I think these are all, I don't think I'm surprised because I see more highlights of Doué than I do of Dembele recently.
Yeah, Dembele's not. I mean, he's been like really, really, really good. And the thing is like he's had. I think PSG. There's been sort of like, if you want, like 3 phases of PSG. There's been the beginning of the year. It was all Barcola, Barcola this, Barcola that, and then turn of the year. Or end of 2024, 2025 is Dembele, most goals in 2025 was like on like Messi, Ronaldo-esque numbers for like the beginning of the year, so on and so forth. I mean, he's still doing well and whatnot, but it's, dried up a bit. And now it's all Doué. Doué's been like scoring consistently in the league, such as so on and so forth. So I feel like, and that's one of the things that like Luis Enrique really wanted to go and say. And I mean, which is why I'm sort of actually happy that like Real Madrid got knocked out is the whole thing, because people laugh last year. Like we would say, a lot of PSG fans were going saying that, no, we're going to be better without Mbappe. And what Enrique was saying is that this year, instead of having, one person in Mbappe scoring 40, 50 goals a season, he'd much rather have, 4 or 5 players score 12 goals in a season and have a much more, coherent, balanced squad. And he's gotten his wish, I think Barcola is on like 14, 50, nearly 20 goals. Dembele is probably continuously get like, I think he's on like 33 or 34 goals currently. Doué, despite only like really starting to pick up form in the since like December, is already on like nearly 10 goals. So I think, we're a lot more balanced. And so in that respect, it means that nobody's like just been consistently at the top. Whereas even though Raphinha's had his dip in form or not been nearly as good, in that time he's still been scoring goals, which is why for me, Raphinha is currently the front runner for the Ballon d'Or.
I think the Dembele comparison is probably similar to Lewandowski, where he's on 40 goals and he's only got 3 assists. But those numbers are ridiculous, and I'm barely hearing him talked about in that conversation at all. All those score 90 percentages, man, there's nowhere near it. That we'll give that as much weight as you want. But I think, again, Lewandowski, if he does something ridiculous against Inter or in the final in the Champions League, that conversation can change. But I don't know. I feel bad for the guy because he didn't win in 2020. Yeah. And I would love for him to win this season in a way that, Raphinha would be cool, but I think I feel for the story of Lewandowski, and I'd love to see him win it as a, whatever, he's 35 or he just turned 36 or something. So I'd love to see him do it, but I don't know. I just don't think, he's been more important than not even more important, but just more appealing than the other guys around him. You know what I mean? Still throughout the season, scoring 40 goals, people are criticizing him like crazy.
Yeah, so. that's the thing. I'm going and saying I'm like Raphinha, all this. I mean, Lewandowski, getting all the criticism. I'm just thinking like, if I had to play out my team, and I guess I can sort of understand it also in that I understand because even at PSG when Mbappe was scoring those 50, 40 goals a season, yes, it's nice that he's putting the ball in the back of the net, but there's also a lot of stuff, that he's not doing, missing chances, not pressing all this stuff that is hampering the team, and sort of his goals are sort of washing away. So I can understand that, but at the same time too, this guy's going 40 goals a season. You gotta respect that as well.
Yeah, it's a good season, but I don't know. What do you? I want to hear your predictions for the Champions League semifinals. What do you think's gonna happen? First leg and second leg.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start off with the PSG game. I think as close as it is, I think obviously I'll go off, but I think PSG will go through. For the first leg, I could genuinely see even a 2-2 draw. I think it's really tight between the two teams. I don't see PSG not conceding. I think it's been a while in the Champions League that we haven't gotten a clean sheet. I think the last time was that second leg against Liverpool, where even despite that, we could very much conceded a goal. And so I think we will concede, but I think also we will be able to score. But it's not going to be some high scoring game. And then in the second leg, I'll go and say like a a cheeky 2-1. Very like just barely getting through. So I'll be hoping for. So I guess 4-3 on aggregate. I think it's gonna be a really close tie. And as I said before, I could very much see that Arsenal, go through, go on penalties and so on and so forth. So it's tight. Regarding the Barca Inter game, as I said again, even though like I will say that obviously the second leg against Dortmund certainly has perhaps hampered expectations of like potentially how good they might be. I still think also that people sort of Inter have been getting a bit, not everywhere, because I feel like on the generality, I think Inter have probably been underrated over the course of the season. Yeah. But I also think that them being Bayern has perhaps made all of a sudden think, they're clear favorites for Barca. I still think that, especially that first leg for me against Bayern, and even across the two legs, like Bayern were more than deserving to go through. Yeah. And I think like there was chances that Harry Kane had, especially in that first leg, he hit the post, so on and so forth. Yeah. I've also a Raphinha this season, that's a goal. Even a Lamine, who's not, the greatest finisher, is obviously still young, so on and so forth. That's a goal. And not only that, but to create more chances as well. So I'd edge it out to Barca. First leg is, if I'm not mistaken, is at the Montjuic. So I'd say I could see I could say also a 3-1. Yeah. 3-1. I think it's 2-0 for most of the game. Barca get a very late goal like PSG did against Aston Villa in the first leg to close the game off. And let's say even like I could probably see you guys potentially losing away at the Giuseppe Meazza. Probably butchered the Italian there. But yeah, maybe a 2-1. But you guys still go through overall. I was at 4-3, 4. What would that be? I said 3-1 and 2-1. So it'd be 4-3 on aggregate. Is what I'd say, and then set up a PSG Barca final, and then we'll see. We'll see. We'll go on from there. But sure. What about you? What are your predictions for the semifinals?
I think you're right. I don't know. I think it's interesting to point out that PSG haven't had the best defensive record. I think that makes me feel better about having to play them potentially. It's going to be, that would be such a sick game. So I want that to happen. I'm going to go with your prediction. I'm going to stick with PSG winning, not the cleanest football or not the cleanest victory, but I don't think Arsenal have the firepower to really outshoot PSG in any way. So that's I'll stick with that. And then against, I think they'll win the home leg. And you could argue that the Estadio Olympique energy is nowhere near what it is normally at the Camp Nou, and it definitely is. According to one of my guys there, they said that I think the like demographic of the stadium at the Montjuic is 70% tourists, 30% actual locals, which obviously affects the energy. It affects the chance. It's not the same. That being said, I don't really think it's mattered that much this season, and they're showing up enough that it's good. And I think they'll win. I think they'll win well in the first leg against Inter Milan, and I think it's all about the second leg. It's maintaining that it's the lead if it is that, and then probably conceding a couple, probably losing, and then working their way. It's to the final. I think it'll probably be like maybe 4-2, 4-1 on aggregate, but I think Barcelona wins. I think they have it. I think we've seen some Italian pundits talking about Lamine too, negatively. So every time that's happened, Lamine just puts some weird photo in his profile picture on Instagram and then just turns it on. So, I think he's going to Aura Farm again, and we'll get through.
Chava, I could definitely see him scoring away at the Giuseppe Meazza.
Oh my God, dude, the hate crimes.
The Neymar, the hate crimes, dude. Put the pants down, get all the, definitely out, No, respect. Well, Robby, it's been a pleasure. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know that you're a really, really busy man. To anybody watching the video, if you do not know Robby Lou and you are a Barca fan, what are you doing? This is, in my opinion, is the best Barca creator out there. I mean, certainly English-speaking one. Right. Can't fully speak Spanish yet. We don't count the Spaniards. No. But yeah, for me, definitely the best English-speaking one. The stories you've had. He recently went to Barcelona, watched the Real Betis versus Barcelona game, as well as the first leg against Dortmund. I'd highly recommend going and watching those vlogs and the stories you made there. They are excellent video.
Thank you, man.
The video quality, the production quality is actually ridiculous. So highly recommend anybody watching the video, if you're a Barca fan or if you're just a football fan in general, highly recommend going subscribing to him, not only on YouTube, but also on Instagram, watching his big up streams as well and everything. So Robby, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope we can do this once again.
Hell yeah, definitely. If it's PSG versus Barcelona, we have to do it again.
Yeah, 100%.
Hell yeah.
Well, with that, guys, thank you very much. And as always, remember to stay safe, stay kind, and stay blessed. Godspeed to you all. Bye.
Hell yeah.